Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling. Thank you for watching. This is kind of a follow-up episode. Earlier I did one on the top 10 or 10 of my favorite debut albums that came out in the 1970s. And this one is one that I have more of a connection with a little bit because I grew up during the 80s. So these are my 10 of my favorite debut albums to come out during the 1980s. So as we move along, a lot of these are ones that I remember when they were new albums. One of the things I noticed the differences between the 1970s and 1980s because a lot of times a band didn't get really good until maybe their third or fourth album, and there were some bumps along the way. A lot of these 80s albums, especially towards the end of the 80s, to me are perfect from start to finish. Now maybe that's nostalgia, but I don't think so. I think a lot of them were just really well written, really well prepared. Unfortunately, by the time the end of the 80s rolled around, there wasn't a lot longer for the heyday of that kind of music, the kind of music that I like. But anyway, these are 10 really good, really strong debut albums. There's a few others that I'm, first of all, lacking on vinyl. First Poison, First Extreme come to mind, but these are 10 really good ones. First one, I'm going to go all the way back to 1981. Now, I'm not a huge Motley Crue fan. I'm a fan. But I think one of their best, most consistent albums is the first one, Too Fast for Love. I really like this album. This is a Canadian issue on Elektra. And you don't see a lot of the original Motley albums that aren't reissues. And for some reason, this copy I got obviously came in the wrong sleeve because this is MCA on it. But that's what the label looked like, the red Elektra label that they were using at that time. And this actually has a copyright date on the record itself of 1982 because that's when it was reissued, but the record's from 81. And here's one that is from 82. One of the unsung bands, one of my all-time favorite bands that didn't have a very long career. This is the first album from Vandenberg. And if you're a Whitesnake fan, you'll recognize the name Vandenberg because it's Adrian Vandenberg, the guitar player. And this was his self-titled band. They put out 3 albums from the early to mid-80s. And this is the first one, their most successful, on Atlantic Records, had Burning Heart, which was a top 40 single. Very cool logo. Obviously, I think they were trying to model it after Van Halen. And the Vandenberg stuff is not very common at all. The sleeve that came with it says the Atlantic Group. And the record itself has the repeating Atco logo on it. Another band that I really like, they put out a strong debut album, also from 1982. This is the first Night Ranger album, Dawn Patrol. This version that I've got here is a US version. They were on MCA for most of their career in the 80s, but this first album was on the label Boardwalk, which was formed by Neil Bogart, formerly of Casablanca Records, and he died within a year of this album coming out. Almost looks like it's a jagged cut along here. I don't know what the story is with that, but this is a great album. Good start to one of the best melodic rock bands, in my opinion. The record itself, that's what the Boardwalk label looked like. So 1983, I've never been what you'd call much of a metalhead, but Metallica has always been an exception for me. And this is my copy of their debut album, Kill 'Em All. I was lucky enough to find a copy in really good shape on Music for Nations Records. This is a UK edition of Kill 'Em All. Really good shape. That's what the record itself looks like. Came with a t-shirt order form. Still, whoever had this record took really good care of it.
Awesome.
And inner sleeve with photos and lyrics. This is a harder, almost a cardboard paper sleeve, so it's held up really well. And now for something completely different. We're going to move on to 1984 now. And very important band in my musical development. An album that I think deserves mention because you don't hear about it very much is the first Bon Jovi album. In 1984, this is a Canadian edition. You don't see their first album all the time when digging through. You don't see the first 2, actually. Here's what the record itself looks like. The red Mercury label on it. And the inner sleeve. Very early photo of the group. Dave Bryan listed as Dave Rashbaum. That's his actual name. Bryan's his middle name. Changed it after this. And the logo was different too. I kind of like this logo, but I like the other one better. So, also 1984, another great band, another one of my favorites. This time around, Canadian band, Honeymoon Suite. This is their first album. This is an iconic album cover for anybody that grew up watching much music in the 80s, The Bed of Nails. Used that in the New Girl Now video. This is a Canadian edition of the first record. And again, a good start, a really good start. I think The Big Prize and Racing After Midnight are better albums, but this is definitely a good one. Here's the sleeve, of course, Niagara Falls. Both of these pictures are Niagara Falls photos. And the record itself, WEA. In the States, you just simply have a Warner Brothers logo there. 1986, things are starting to get really, really good now, as far as debut albums being complete debut albums, like ready to go right from the beginning. Cinderella, Night Songs. This one took me a long time to find on vinyl. I think I have Bug Campbell to thank for locating this one. Yeah, Bug found this one for me, so it's awesome. 1986, band that did not sound like they looked. They were a little bit heavier. This is their heaviest album, actually, but some great tunes on here. Back cover, a little bit of damage done to the back cover. Something sticky must have been on this. And I don't know, I think there was an original lyric sleeve. I don't have that, but this is the record itself. Same as the Bon Jovi, Mercury Records, and the same logo they used on this. Another one of my favorite bands came out of the 80s, put their first album out in 1986, is Tesla. This is their first album, Mechanical Resonance. This is a Canadian edition on Geffen Records. You don't see Tesla Records very much, so I was excited to locate this. And it came with an inner sleeve as well. That's actually Nikola Tesla there. And credits on that cover. And the usual silver Geffen logo on a black label. A band that gets a bum rap, and I'm going to say right now, they are one of my favorites to come out of the late 80s, is Winger. This is their debut album. I love this artwork. It's kind of got a hysteria look to it, which maybe was by design. I don't know. I just think this is one of those perfect albums where there's not a second of wasted space. This is from 1988 originally, and this is a U.S. Canadian edition on Atlantic. Anything that came out in Atlantic in 1988 had a 40th anniversary logo on it. This one's no exception. This one I actually, you know what? There. Oh! It had gotten torn open, so all that was doing was getting in the way. They're continuing that theme. Again, very Def Leppard-like inside here with like the gun sight or whatever this is supposed to be. Really, really like this album. And red and green Atlantic logo. And we're going to stick with Atlantic Records for the final entry. And the only band that back in the day was my favorite band on the strength of one album. That's how much I was into Skid Row. This is from 1989. This is not something that you see on vinyl very much at all. And this is their first album on Canadian edition on Atlantic Records. But what I like about having this on vinyl is because on the cassette and even on the CD, it's really hard to make out the band members in this picture, but on the vinyl you can see them a little bit better. And lyrics and credits to all the songs. And I just think this is one of the best debut albums of any era. There you go. So what are your favorite debut albums to come out in 1980? There's more I could have mentioned. You might notice I didn't even mention Def Leppard On Through the Night. I like the record. I like these ones a little bit more. So list your favorite 80s debuts below here. And curious to see how many different ones we have or how many are the same. Thanks for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.